Welcome back to Spiritwind. And as you remember, Spiritwind is a class for spiritual adventurers. We talk about a lot of different subjects, but kind of always comes back to spirituality in some way or another. We've been talking about different philosophers and morality, and we talk about different religions. We're all over the place in our discussions. But if you could come join us on Wednesday evenings at 5:30 at Unity of Auburn, we'd love to have you join us and help us discuss these items. So with me today is our teacher guru, Rick Reich, and we're going to go over what we discussed in May, and then we'll discuss what we're going to be talking about in June. So first of all, Rick, what was our topic for May?
Well, our topic for May, as heavy as it sounds, was the ultimate nature of reality. And what I mean the ultimate nature of reality is I'm not talking about everyday reality or what science is saying so much about ultimate reality, but really the question that has been asked for the last over some 2,500 years: what is reality made of? And that's the question.
And so what makes something real?
Right.
Basically. Okay. All right. So could you give us a little brief summary then of what reality is made of?
Well, this actually started some 2,700 years ago in the Greek-speaking colonies on the coast of what is now Turkey. There emerged a new way of thinking. Instead of thinking everything happened because of the gods or because of magic and all these kind of things, they were trying to think through their reasoning, which was something that hadn't been done so far. And so we're going to look at a number of these people and how they conceived reality, or what reality is made of. The first was Thales of Miletus. He lived from 642 to 547 before the Common Era. And he's embraced by both philosophers and scientists. He's seen as the first philosopher. He's also seen as the first scientist. And he taught that everything was made out of water, which seems maybe silly to us at first, but when you think of it, water is something that can be a liquid, a solid, or a gas. And he saw that everything on Earth is a liquid, a solid, or a gas. So from that he determined that everything must be made out of water at some point. And he was the earliest of the Greek thinkers that we know of. Anaximenes, who lived 550 before the Common Era, believed everything was made out of air. and that was because he believed, through his own observations, that air condenses into rain, and when it cools down it becomes earth, and when it heats up it becomes fire. And so those are what he saw. Pythagoras, that probably some of you have heard of, that are taking geometry or the Pythagorean theory and stuff like that, he believed that the whole cosmos could be understood as being made up of numbers. He's the one that he determined things on instruments, like musical instruments. And he noticed that if you played different notes at different points, it made different sounds. And that's where we get the idea of the music of the spheres, some people refer to. But, and we think about numbers today as everything on a computer is numbers. I mean, it looks like words, it looks like pictures to us, but when you break it down, it's numbers. Then there was Heraclitus of Ephesus, and he was around 500 before the Common Era, and he believed that everything is change and in continual flux. He's the one that said you can never step into the same river twice. And you can thrive in a changing world.
Oh.
That's a saying at Unity.
Yeah.
To thrive in a changing world. And then finally, in that early time, around the 400s before the Common Era, there were two philosophers by the name of Leucippus and Democritus, and they were the first atomists. They believed that all reality was composed of atoms in a void. But when they thought of atoms, they didn't mean the same thing we mean as atoms. When we think of atoms, we're thinking of energy. But they saw them as little solid balls, that there was those kind of atoms made everything, like they made this, or the chairs we're sitting on, our bodies are made of atoms, everything's made of atoms within the void. And so the space around us is a void, and everything we see is atoms.
I think they were on the right track.
They were,
Yeah.
and in fact, that's why they called atoms in our times, because of what they taught. Yeah, and then there was one, Empedocles. He is the one that taught that everything's composed of 4 different elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And so everything in the cosmos is a mixture of those different things in different ways, and that's how we come out with different things. And what's interesting is his view. Of all the other views, none of them were kept going, although I can see Pythagoras' numbers, and I can see the atoms as having some influence on modern times, but Empedocles is the longest standing one, in that his view that everything was made of earth, air, fire, and water is something that was held in the West even till the 17th century. So, anyway.
Well, can you give us some more modern views?
Yeah, there was Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who lived from 1646 to 1716, and Leibniz taught that everything was made out of monads. Now he was he was theorizing, trying to give a name to what he envisioned, and it's very similar to atoms, but he said that these monads were eternal, indecomposable, individual, and subject to their own laws. And he said that these monads were made in what he called a pre-existing harmony. In other words, the monads worked together not because monads were trying to do something new or something like that. They had a pre-established harmony that guided them to be what they were. They differ from atoms in that so long as the interactions of monads are only apparent.
So it's like the monads know what to do on their own?
He wasn't clear. I know he believed in God, so I don't know if he thought that God predetermined them to do what they did or not, or he just said it was pre-established harmony.
Oh.
And he didn't expel that out.
Okay.
And then he said each monad is like a little mirror of the universe, so it's kind of like holographic even. So then next we come to Bishop Berkeley, who lived from 1685 to 1773, and also Charles Fillmore, an American mystic and co-founder of Unity, they both hold that, and this is Fillmore's quote, "What we call matter proves to be a form of mind, and that there is only divine mind in which there are countless forms." And this is what Bishop Berkeley taught as well. He was an Irish bishop, and he said that there's only divine mind. So everything we see is part of the divine mind. Alfred North Whitehead was one of the most brilliant philosophers that I know of. He was a mathematician and a philosopher who taught at University of London and Harvard. He was a mathematician in the late 1910s, and later in the 20s he turned his attention to philosophy of science and metaphysics. Whitehead argued that reality consists of processes rather than material objects. Everything's a process. Now, he was alive during the revolution that was taking place in physics.
Right, because Einstein was during that time.
Right.
Yes.
During that same time. And so what he was seeing that everything, even things that look solid, are in process.
Always changing.
They're always changing. For instance, if we sat here long enough, this stand here would decompose and rust and fall apart and be gone.
Right.
And eventually be dust. So even though it seems like it's solid, it seems like it's stationary, it's really in process. And that's what he was saying.
And that's what the physicists came up with, entropy.
Right.
The whole universe is...
Entropy is exactly the point.
Right.
Entropy, that everything will eventually go to its lowest point. His book, which was called Process and Reality, is a foundational text for process philosophy and theology. This is kind of interesting. Whitehead taught that by thinking of a rock or any material thing as being fundamentally the same throughout time, with any changes to it being secondary to its nature, scientific materialism hides the fact that nothing ever stays the same. Change is fundamental and inescapable. Therefore, a person is philosophically described as a continuum of overlapping events, or what he calls occasions of experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's pretty true.
Yeah.
We're always evolving.
So anyway, he said there's no such thing as inert matter. Even though it looks like it's inert, meaning just sitting there like a rock is just sitting there or something, it says there's no such thing like that. All actual occasions are self-directed to some degree.
Uh-oh, we get this self-directed thing again.
Yeah. And that's a very deep thing to go in with Whitehead, so I'm not going to go any further with that.
But we can discuss this in class.
Yeah, we can discuss it in class.
Okay.
Then the last person I want to look at was Ken Wilber. He was born in 1949. As far as I know, he's still alive. And he's an American writer and philosopher who was born in Oklahoma City, attended Duke University as a pre-med student, and then enrolled in University of Nebraska to study biochemistry. He wrote in 1995 a book called A Brief History of Everything. And he founded what he called the Integral Institute in 1998. He calls his theory, it was holons, and he got this idea from Arthur Koestler, who was a writer back in the, Arthur Koestler lived from 1905 to 1983. And he got this idea of holons. Now, The word holon comes from the Greek word holos, or whole, and it's something that is both a whole and a part. And holons exist simultaneously as wholes in relation to subordinate parts. For example, an atom is a whole, but it's part of a molecule. And a molecule is a whole, but a part of a cell. And an organ is a whole, but a part of a person's body. And a person's body is whole, but a part of a family. And it keeps on going all the way to our galaxy as a whole, but a part of the universe.
Right.
So he doesn't look at things in terms of what they're made of, but really instead at the relationships that each thing has to each other thing, you know. Wilbur says that the test of holon hierarchy, and he doesn't like to use the word hierarchy, so he says holarchy, because he's doing holons, so he says holarchy, is that if all instances of a given type of holon cease to exist, then all the holons they were a part of must cease to exist as well. Mm-hmm. Since one is built on the other, right. If one goes, all the others go below it.
Right.
And then he talks about different types of holons. There's individual holons, which are discrete, self-contained, and also demonstrate qualities of self-directed behavior. There's self-directed again,
yes.
behavior, and he says that is their I-ness. And then there's social holons that possess we-ness. With geese, each goose is an individual holon, and the flock makes up a social holon. And then there are what he calls artifacts, and they are anything that are created by either an individual holon or a social holon. And then he says there are heaps. And heaps are defined as random collections of holons that lack any sort of organizational significance, such as a pile of leaves. Leaves would be an example of a heap. There's no organization to it. You know, it's just a bunch of leaves on the ground.
And they can blow away
right,
and
do whatever.
Create another heap somewhere else.
Yeah. And then at the end, I'm not going to go into this now, but at the end we'll talk some about nuclear physics as well.
Well, this is interesting because we have the nature of reality, mm-hmm. and we're talking about reality as physical reality, and I think more and more we're questioning that.
Right.
What is our physical reality? Mm-hmm. Are we a part of just the numbers, the ones and the zeros in a computer game?
Right.
What is the actual reality? So we've looked at the history of how people have thought about these things, but I think there's going to be a lot more discussion about the nature of reality. So we'll wrap this one up and go into our topic for June. And so maybe you can tell us what the topic is for June.
Now this is going to sound kind of funny, but I, for lack of a better term, I call it sacred lists of things. Sacred lists. And it's a very unique way of looking at different religions.
Okay, let's see what you mean on this one.
So I take numbers 1 through 12.
Okay.
And I look at them from the perspective of different religions. So like for instance, 1 could stand for monotheism. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity are monotheistic religions. They believe in one God. There's also monism, which is the philosophical view that there is ultimately only one substance and that all the variety of existing things that we actually see are a single reality, despite the fact that they look like a lot of things.
That kind of ties into what we were just discussing
Yes,
then.
yes.
Obviously, yeah.
So then, on 2, what we look at is 2 shows duality, up and down, inside out, male, female, God, the world, heaven and earth, mind and body, mind and brain. And so, and those things go through, are discussed in all religions as well. Then when we go to the number 3, we have other 3s. We have like the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But we also have the Father, the Mother, and the Child. We have what's called the Celtic triple goddess, which is the maiden, the mother, and the crone. We have the moon with its waxing, full, and waning times. In Hinduism, we have the 3 main gods, Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer, and Shiva, the destroyer. And Hindus believe that those are in cycles. First, Brahma creates, Vishnu sustains for a time, and then Shiva destroys. And then the cycle begins over again with Brahma creating. And then in Buddhism, they talk about the 3 poisons, which are greed, anger, and ignorance. And they must be overcome by 3 other things, which is generosity, compassion, and wisdom. And then there are the 3 omnis, what I call the omnis, the omnipresent, omniscience, and omnipotent. Then when we get to the 4s, we can think back of Empedocles' 4 elements, air, fire, water, and earth. We can think of the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We can think of the 4 noble truths of Buddhism, being 1, the universality of suffering, 2, suffering comes as a result of desire and ignorant craving, 3, the end of suffering comes through total abandonment of ignorant craving, and 4, the way to accomplish this is through the Eightfold Path, which we'll look at when we get to 8.
Right.
So then on 5, we have the 5 senses, seeing, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. And in Buddhism, we have the 5 precepts. Thou shalt not kill, steal, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. We also come to the 5 pillars of Islam. 1 is the Shahada, which is there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. Prayer 5 times a day, the giving of alms, fasting during the month of Ramadan, and pilgrimage to Mecca. Those are the 5 pillars of Islam. And then in Sikhism, they have what are called the 5 Ks. Castes, and this is descriptive of how they are as people. In Sikhism, the Ks are Kes, which means uncut hair. Sikhs don't cut their hair, or they're not supposed to. And that's why they wear turbans, because they roll the hair up in the turban. They have a special comb that's called a kanga, and they have a special warrior's underwear that they wear called a kachira. I think it sounds similar to me to the Mormons' undergarments. And then they wear a steel bracelet, which is called a kara, and they have a ceremonial dagger called a kirpan. On 6, we have the 6 days of creation. We have the 666 of Revelation. In 7, we have the 7 days of creation. That's the 6 days plus the 7th day Sabbath. 7 churches of Revelation, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 plagues of the book of Revelation. Hindus talk of 7 chakras in the body. And then there are the 7 sacraments of the church: baptism, confirmation, Eucharist, penance, extreme unction, orders, and marriage. And then there are the 7 deadly sins: pride, covetousness, lust, envy, glutton, anger, and sloth, or sloth. 8, we have the Eightfold Path of Buddhism: right understanding, right thought, right speech, right conduct, which is guided by the 5 precepts, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation. Then under 9, we have 9 months of pregnancy. And then we have the gifts of the Spirit. There's 9 gifts of the Spirit. There's 9 appointments of the church, different roles people play, and there's 9 fruits of the Spirit. At 10, you have 10 fingers and 10 toes. There's 10 commandments, and there's 10 spheres on the Kabbalistic tree of life. 11, we'll look at that. 11 completes the cycle and signals a new beginning from the other numbers, because 10 is the end and 11 begins the next cycle in numerology. And then 12, which is the last thing I look at, there's the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 disciples or apostles, and then there are the 12 steps of recovery in the different anonymous groups, which I won't take the time to talk about right now, but there are that.
So all of these things we see have biblical connections in the numerology, but also other social and even pagan references.
Right, and different religions as well, like Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, and the Islam. So it's just an interesting way, I think, to kind of mix it up and look at all these different things.
Right, right. Well, it seems like this will be a very interesting discussion also. You seem to pick up, very thoughtful items for us to discuss, keeping us thinking all the time. And that's what this class is all about. Spiritwind, a course for spiritual adventurers. And this is what it means. Let's look at all these different things in our class. And our class that meets every Wednesday at 5:30 at Unity of Auburn, which is at 1212 High Street. So again, I invite you to come and join us. There's no charge for the class. Come and be a part of this. Bring your thoughts, bring your friends, and we'll have a great discussion. So again, Rick, I'd like to thank you for your time and your discussion today. And I'm Pam Hart, and I thank you for joining us.